Hey, welcome everybody, EOS community. How's it going, Jaron, John? I think Jason might be out there as well. So yeah, welcome to our first EOS Ignite kind of tokenomic and DAC weekly series, and this is our first one. And so for those that remember and attended EOS Ignite in August, we have Justin here from EOS Silicon Valley and Haley from EOS Cafe, who both of them spoke about tokenomics. So hopefully you check out those videos. But we just decided to do this weekly series. I get excited when we talk about DACs and tokenomics. I think this is one of the key areas for enabling success of blockchain technology. Creating these organizations, sovereign organizations on top of the blockchain, and immune from external, almost state actors and things like that. So I mean, we have a sovereign money with crypto, and I think we have potentially a sovereign, almost sovereign nation with DACs, and we just have to get the tokenomics right, I think. But that's why I'm so interested in this. So Justin and Haley, maybe you can just, I guess, discuss why you're so interested. I mean, you did a talk on it, a presentation just last month, but maybe you can kind of explain just what your thoughts are in the state of tokenomics, or what gets you so excited about it. And then we could just discuss what we're going to talk about in the coming series. And this is very informal, but hopefully, we get more engagement, more people interested in this topic, and more DACs created in the future. So hopefully we can help that, help kind of speed that process up. So since you're next to me on the screen, Justin, you go ahead, and then Haley.
Sorry, reverberation. Does someone have a?
Oh, okay. Okay, so let me see if I got. Let me.
Maybe I need to turn mine off. I'm not sure. Oh, that's better. No, that's great.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So should I talk about why I'm interested in DACs as well? Because we're going to cover DACs as well. So yeah, I think with DACs, the thing that makes me so excited about it is that I feel that it's going to be this new way to build a company. And we've seen how kind of decentralization, or an element of decentralization, has improved things like ride sharing and Airbnb, where although it's still controlled by a centralized company, which is bad, you still have seen companies that have grown all the way across the world really, really super quickly by decentralizing the workforce. Of course, we want to build on top of that, but I feel like using decentralization, you can actually build and do great things really quickly. So that's where I'm interested in DACs. As for tokenomics, I feel like tokenomics are the kind of method or getting the incentivization right of a network where all the users have something that they can get out of it that's fair, and that the level of how rewarding it is actually makes it sort of addictive to work and complete things. So yeah, that's what gets me excited about tokenomics.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I think tokenomics and DACs, they go perfectly together. DACs are like they're a new governance structure, and with we can almost do unlimited things with them. And what tokenomics allow is some really cool feedback loops, right? If you think of a traditional organization where stockholders, they elect the board of directors, and the board of directors choose who the executives are, who hire employees. The feedback loop on any decision on what direction that company is going, it's like every year there's a general meeting of the shareholders, and they never get to like nudge the company, right? It's at one point they get fed up and they might fire half the board, and it's just such a slow, cumbersome feedback loop. With blockchain, with the right tokenomic system, it enables DACs where the feedback loop can be daily. Like just look on EOS, like it's every two minutes, right? There's an election, and that kind of thing. And any DAC built on EOS, maybe you don't want that type of feedback loop, but it's kind of up to the creator, the designer, to decide who the stakeholders are and how they'll influence the decision. And it doesn't have to be this kind of strata of, customers, employees, executives, board of directors, shareholders that is almost in every structure that we see. So yeah, DAX is just, the sky's the limit for what you can do.
Yeah, definitely.
You're unmuting.
Sorry about that. So yeah, and thanks for that, and thanks for the others that have joined us. Jason, Costa Rica. There's the chat on the side, and then there's also a question a place where you can ask questions at the bottom. So let's get started. Just discussing a variety of topics, and then we can probably open it up for questions. So maybe just news-wise, you kind of what's the latest trend or any piece of news that you've heard recently just surrounding DAX or tokenomics? Maybe we can start with either topic and just get up to speed. Are there any other resources that people can look to? Any projects that you think are good?
Well, I think the obvious one is EOS DAC. I find it hard to follow all the news with what everyone's doing because we're just so busy ingrained in all our BP activities. But I always try and keep up to date with what they're doing. And I think it's just such a new area, DAX, that there isn't a lot of news or a lot of information about how one should do one. We're still like in a discovery phase at the moment. But I saw that EOS DAC released their portal, which at the moment you can send money and it's got a wallet and that sort of functionality. But I imagine there'll be voting, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. But maybe Haley is more up to date with the news probably than me.
Yeah, DACs are, like you said, so new. It's hard to keep up to date with them all. And EOS DAC, I would agree, is the go-to example because they're kind of on the cutting edge, right? Like they're the people releasing on GitHub, releasing the smart contracts to be a DAC. And I'm actually involved in a DAC EOS Cafe, and we're looking into them, for. We're kind of trying to be the second mover because we want to see, okay, they built these contracts, they're open source. How do they work? How are they going to work in practice? And I think the whole community is watching. Everyone who's excited about DAX has their eyes on EOS DAC because it's an experiment. You have they have a very large user base. They have a large token holder community, very active in the Telegram, very engaged, and now they're rolling out the tools. And it's kind of like we all get front row seats. They're definitely on the cutting edge.
Definitely. One question I have, and I don't know if anyone can answer it, is EOS itself technically a DAC? Because, we all get paid by EOS, the network inflation. That's how we get paid. We have voting, where anyone can get involved in the governance of the blockchain, which is sort of like an organization. Are things like that technically a DAC? Also dApps themselves, like Steemit, for example, where, I think there is some voting and governance there as well. And, people also can contribute to the content of the network and they can retrieve value. So should we look at DApps more broadly as including dApps and blockchains themselves? I don't know.
I would say yes. I think delegated proof of stake systems like EOS BitShares and Steam before EOS are also, I think, considered, or you can consider DACs as well. So any DPoS system you can probably consider a DAC. Outside of maybe Dan Larimer projects, even maybe something like Dash or something, or what else? There's any master node system you can probably consider a DAC as well. How's it going, Mel and Vile? So I would say so. What about you, Haley? I mean, is there?
You know what? I would agree. I think the way that Block One has had an arm's length approach definitely puts us in that camp. Like I would say Ethereum, something like that would not be a DAC because they have the foundation. They do have someone who kind of coordinates and calls the shots and is rather centralized, who isn't elected. And EOS, everything is decentralized. People are elected, and in the future they will be as we build. So it very much is kind of a DAC or a DAO. It's a community that governs and builds itself. Which is very much what a DAC is.
Yeah. So I think that the governance layer is probably the distinction to consider something a DAX. If there is some kind of governance layer that's not a corporation in kind of in a state or a nation, I think you could probably consider it a DAC. So yeah, it's so we have more like DAX on top of it, the main DAC, I guess. So one project I would look at as a example, and this is, I recently dug in a little bit more deeply. I mean, I heard of it before, but and again, this is not really in depth, but there's a project called the Aragon project, Aragon on Ethereum. And I realized that they were doing a lot of similar things based on what I thought would be kind of the first iterations of the DAC, really using kind of the current capitalist model, equity, cap tables, startup stuff, and just porting that in. But beyond that, they even have, and interestingly enough, an arbitration layer that we're all kind of in conversations about, right? But they have like their own arbitration system, kind of bonding system that they're planning to create. So and it's almost like a jurisdiction on top of Ethereum. So I thought it was good because a lot of the same ideas that we're kind of encountering, they've also are thinking about. But so anyways,
what was that project called again?
Aragon, Aragon.
Okay.
Yeah, they did an ICO. They raised a decent amount of money, and they actually have they had good treasury management, so they still have a lot of cash in there. I think we should collaborate with them. Actually, we should see if we could get them to collaborate on an EOS, project. Just because I think that they're already they seem. I mean, that's what they've been working on for quite a long time already. So, and I think it's collaboration. It's great. I mean, we just do it on EOS. I mean, we could just kind of do our own thing, but I'm sure they've also encountered a lot of things we could learn from. So maybe I was thinking of just collaborating with them, seeing if they're open to that. But anyway, so that's one project. In tokenomics in general, the other, aragon.org, great. Convert them to EOS. Yeah, because I don't think there's that many projects that are building on top of them, and it's probably because a lot of the scalability issues, So if anything, they'll probably want to stick with Ethereum. We'll just try to get them to do kind of a collaborate with another EOS project doing the same thing. So is my thought. So yeah, and I think that is true. I think a lot of projects will move over to EOS, and so if we have this setup with DACs that are easy for people to get started and maybe just transfer their project over to us, that'd be great. And I think a lot of the reasons why these projects aren't going to make it is because of the tokenomics. You know, they'll have to change it. They'll have to, like everything in people's white papers. I mean, it was all experimentation before, but I think the big bottleneck is just the tokenomics probably never made sense, I think, a lot of times, but they raised a lot of money. And so now I think if they want to kind of continue with the project, I'd say, yeah, I mean, we can help them, right? If we get it right. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that we have all the right answers either. So, but I think if we think this way and just find kind of new models or just improve on existing models.
I think healthy collaboration is key in like we're all going to build DACs. One thing that I think I'm already seeing happening is a lot of people are rereading just because you can. It's like fun. It's tokenomics. It's exciting. You can be creative, but I think there's a lot of people are coming across the same pitfalls, or they're, you know, I know that just from my brief experience, like, you know, my short time working with EOS, I'm coming to appreciate some, you know, centralization in some places, right? You kind of realize that, oh, if no one takes steps up and takes a leadership role and helps coordinate things, it's the Tower of Babel, right? It's just nothing gets done and everyone has an opinion. And I think a lot of DACs are going to suffer from this kind of trade-off between wanting all the benefits that come from decentralization, between spreading decision-making on all the layers of stakeholders, but also just having some efficiency in decision-making. Because, you know, there is a reason that model I talked about earlier, like the corporation, it has its pitfalls, but it's also worked very well for hundreds of years and has built some massive institutions. So we can democratize it, but if we move too far away from it, we're gonna realize that it existed for a reason. It's the go-to model for a reason. So it's this watching everyone just kind of figure this out and learn from it, so that we, basically we know what's going to work and what's not. When we build, our own DACs. Basically, I'm saying I think we'll get better at it just by sharing all our kind of experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an iterative process. You don't just start with awesome decentralization like immediately. It takes a lot of time and a lot of mistakes to get to that stage. And I think like with elements of kind of having to have leaders and bits of centralization, I think it's totally okay. I guess maybe we just need to make it an elected position or elected centralization in certain areas. Because yeah, there's definitely areas where centralization works better than decentralization. You just got to find that right balance.
So, and this is one of the key issues I think that we'll come across is this idea that, okay, if you have everybody kind of just en masse be a part of this project, there is, and if it was more purely, let's say less of a market type system, and you have, let's say, one person, one vote type, democratic or pure, like starting at that point, it's hard without the incentives for all the people that usually drive, startup projects to be incentivized to make it a mass success. So it's the idea. Okay, what's this balance, and maybe using kind of the existing more, the capitalist word is kind of, there's a stigma behind it, but just more capitalist system. I would just say more, meritocratic system is something that we should maybe start with first, just because there's some precedents, there's existing. We've done it for a couple hundred years. So and then figure out how to make it more decentralized sooner, because more people can participate earlier. but try to figure out a incentive mechanism where you have both, right? Where so it may just be you just porting over like the equity structure, just give equity out to more people sooner.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as common in the startup world to give equity so soon to just people, but you could create it so that almost like you could have multiple leadership groups all working in the same kind of company rather than just it being stuck with just maybe one leadership group, but you have almost the same incentive mechanism based on milestones or something like that, where if you do well, you could gain more equity in this platform or company, so our community. So, and some people don't like even the company name. They like to say, the DAC is a decentralized autonomous community. But to me, it's more semantics. I mean, company, community. I think it sounds better, community, but it's essentially a company with the kind of equity structure is what I call a company. So
I wish DAO sounded better, the organization, because like for me, that's the most fitting definition. It just doesn't. It's not as catchy as DAC. DAC, I don't know, just people prefer saying it. I think DAO is the better definition. It's an organization. It can be for profit, non-for-profit. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a community. It can be a company. It doesn't have to be really either.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it only becomes a DAC when you incorporate. And it's like, in a lot of cases, I feel like, do we actually need to incorporate or not? I mean, it's only just like compliance and legal issues and banking. It's the actual centralized world that actually forces the incorporation. Whereas otherwise, like, there's no reason why a community can't do all the things that a corporation can do if it wasn't for those centralized aspects, unfortunately. But Jun, you raise an excellent point about kind of just how do we make sure incentivization is good all the way through from the starters, well, from the founders or the people who write the white paper, all the way through to like people who join much later, because you don't want kind of the big problem I see with companies and often a lot of tokenomic models is that if you're the founder, you'll keep 20, 30, 40%, and that's like set. Almost like there's a tiny bit of inflation where you might lose out, but it's pretty much set. And people who join in really, really late, they can only pick up peanuts at the end of the road. Like even if they make a huge contribution, like a massive advertising campaign or something that gets millions of people on board, they can only get rewarded a fraction of what is there, like, less than 1%. So I feel like we need to, if we're actually going to surpass what we have done with the centralized world where founders make the most and big investors, and big whales make all the money, we need to like harness maybe more inflation on a DAC or a DAP, where every year there's plenty of opportunity for new people to jump in and make it even bigger. And yeah, I think we're thinking too small sometimes and only setting the inflation really low and only giving very small opportunities, when really I feel like maybe there's a possibility to take, a few people with an idea to do something in particular. Like you could take that and expand into a massive, more bigger than Google company within only a year or two, if you kind of have incentivization all the way through to get on board. And I think like founders obviously still need to be rewarded substantially, but I think as a founder, you're holding yourself back by not being generous and allowing other people to be properly incentivized. And I've noticed, because I spend obviously a lot of time in Silicon Valley, that a lot of people are quitting their jobs at Google, at Facebook, at eBay, wherever. They're quitting because they're not that incentivized anymore. Like they're like 100K or whatever they're earning, or 150. It's great, but they don't feel like they have much power in that organization. So it's not just about, but they have a limited scope to how much they can achieve. So I think we need to open it up and really allow people to kind of receive unlimited amounts of rewards if they, want to contribute.
Yeah, those are great points, and I do think there is probably some better formula out there to incentivize people who are later in the game. Vile did mention something good though, that early investors are taking the most risks. There's no proof of viability, so we had to balance that too. Where the kind of is there? How do you measure that? If you can measure those kinds of things a little bit earlier about the risk in the early stage, and in traditional equity systems, you can issue you always have an option pool. You issue more shares, but you're right. It's not as large of a pool. It's usually like 10% or something, and you incentivize new employees through stock options. So it's one way. It's just not, I think, as aggressive as maybe you can create, like you're saying, Justin, and where you can actually accelerate the growth properly with everyone incentivized just massively, like get people involved, and you could grow so much more quickly. And
it's not just incentivization. I should clarify. It's also because in like a DAO or a DAC kind of situation, you don't necessarily have to have all those corporate steps that you have in hiring someone. Maybe you can have a lighter vetting process, or even lots of aspects of the organization that people can just jump on board and contribute to. So you could get the amount of staff that Google has kind of really, really quickly if you don't have to go through a traditional hiring process. If you have lighter vetting or no vetting at all, then suddenly you could have 100 employees, 200 employees, 5,000. I mean, I'm helping out with the Telos project, with Infinity Block, and with that, we've gone from 10 people to over 100, maybe 150 people all working on Telos practically, within a couple of months. And we also saw that with EOS. It obviously started with block one, people with an idea, Dan Larimer wrote a white paper. But now if you quantify the amount of employees that are working on EOS and EOS IO, it's probably, I don't know, 1,000, no, probably more. Like every BP might have on average 5 staff members, maybe less, maybe 3. And you've got Block One themselves, you've got all these community contributors. Like we've gone from a tiny amount of contributors to a ton of contributors. And I feel like the amount of contributors on EOS, when you think about it, when you add in all the dApps and everything else, in a couple of years could be 100,000, 200,000. It could be bigger than Google in terms of employees.
And that ties in, I think, really well with just kind of how culture has shifted recently, kind of like the gig-based economy. We're all kind of moving away from a 9-to-5 job, from this thought that, I need to put in 30 years at this company and then they'll give me a pension and then I'll just, retire on this pension. Everyone, a lot of people that I'm seeing, they add value where they can. They have multiple, they have a side hustle, and I think it's really cool just because you can kind of lean in to where you think you'll add value. You can work on multiple creative projects at once. And if you have that paired with a DAC, it doesn't need you to be employee. It just needs you to add value. And then, I don't think there's a perfect system, a perfect meritocracy yet for how to compensate people for their value. I think even in EOS, there's people who are collecting quite a bit. Like there's people who've contributed a lot. And I don't know that they've been adequately rewarded. Just but that's just because it's growing pains. But I do think that DACs can kind of really embrace this change that people just want to work on projects. They don't want necessarily a 9-to-5 job, and they don't want to have a career. They just want to grow and develop skills and have a personal portfolio that might replace a career. It's like, well, look what I've done. I can add this to this project, work on it for a few years, get some tokens for a cool, part of a cool DAC. I really do think that that's part of why people are so excited about DACs. It's like, hey, something I can join, and there's people all over the world working on this, but I don't have to submit a resume. I don't have to, they can just onboard me right away. And if I add value, I add value. If not, I'll go where else I can. I think that's where the world's moving.
Yeah, that's a great point about the trends towards the gig economy, and just it makes sense in light of what Justin just spoke about in Silicon Valley, and even these people working at Google, they don't feel as fulfilled. But if they are able to have the flexibility, be able to contribute to a project, still have time for their own lives, and still get similar rewards, that's probably much more ideal than just a 9-to-5 job. Even in Silicon Valley, it turns into a 9-to-5 routine. But we can see this where it's just so much easier for people to get involved, like Justin said, and Haley as well, where just the cost for people to there's less hurdle for people to just contribute, and that's one of the major benefits. We're going to have, I think, just more of a gig economy where you're not tied to just one company, one project. You can contribute however you want in multiple projects and get more rewards for contributing that way, and not be confined. And so I think that's one of the major advantages. So on the flip side, Jaron says, he's had major resistance to converting traditional business organizations to DACs. We're really at the early stage. So let's go flip it around and say, okay, what are the biggest challenges and difficulties do you see, Justin and Haley, on implementing a system like this?
I think it's the legalities. That's not, we get so swept up with the power of the blockchain and what we can do with it that DACs are going to need to interface with the real world somewhere. If people are getting rewarded in tokens, they live all over the world, they're probably gonna have to pay income tax. How does a DAC own assets? If a DAC does something, let's say there's an oil drilling DAC for whatever reason, and it causes a big oil spill, who do you sue? Who's liable? Is it the person with the most tokens? And these are I don't have the answers to these questions, but just to Jaron's point, if you're a business and you're considering your interface with the real world, you have, you have all this legal framework that you understand, and then you want to move to a DAC, and then someone asks you well, who's liable? Or how are you, what are the tax implications? And if there's no clear answers, because this is all so new, that's, the resistance is just from the vast uncertainty of I think DACs kind of need to grow, and almost, I think there's going to be a lot of failures, but we're all going to learn from them. Go, oh yeah, that DAC incorporated in that company, it seemed to work for a little while, until that, that jurisdiction changed their mind, or they ran afoul in a different jurisdiction. Just we'll see it happen, and we'll all learn and go, okay, this is how we basically take this blockchain enthusiasm and also just kind of take a pragmatic approach that interfaces with the real world. You're not going to get success if you don't interface with the real world.
No, that's an excellent point, Haley. I think in general, there's a lot of fear about the legal ramifications of doing anything in blockchain at the moment. It's holding a lot of projects back. And yeah, that's a real shame, I feel. Because I think just no one wants to go to jail, obviously, but at the same time, the rules and regulations aren't always clear. So someone's got to flaunt the law, or not necessarily flaunt it, but just take the risk, I guess. It's a bit like what Uber did in kind of just going into all these cities with a completely different model, and the law wasn't ready to kind of counter against it or legalize it. It was something that was slightly different to what was there before. So, you know, they just had to bust the doors open and just do it, and then handle all the legal cases and then go from there. But outside of that point is also the fact that I think there's a lot of fear still about kind of the unknown of working in a DAC or a DAO. Like, will it be fair or not? Like, when it's something that you haven't done previously, there's definitely fear and anxiety about it. For instance, like working on kind of the Telos project, when there was this suggestion to go with a slicing pie model, wherein you actually earn kind of pie slices for every hour you do, or a major breakthrough like getting on an exchange or that sort of thing, you earn rewards. But there was this fear in me that was like, well, who's gonna acknowledge these rewards? What if people reject them? What if they don't turn out to be the fair quantities for my hourly work? What if people, you know, say they did work that they didn't do? Like, there's all this fear and anxiety and doubt about whether it will work or not. And until we start to see these successes out in the public and advertised, it'll be at that stage where people will be more confident about actually going with a DAO or a DAC or working on those projects, I feel.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, Justin did tell me about the slicing the pie model, which is fantastic. It is similar to kind of the equity distribution type system that we have. And just to see it being implemented is fantastic. And so, yeah, and then, you know, the newness of this, like the struggles of understanding exactly how this will definitely be a challenge. The legal aspect, we have a governance channel, Haley, about the legal aspects, and I think the corporate, like a corporation, it's actually about liability. I think people will create corporations to prevent personal liability, but I think the reasoning behind liability in general is that, yeah, people can sue companies rather than people, but there needs to be a way that consumers and users have recourse. So we need to eventually set up a structure so that, yeah, the company is liable for the actions that they take in the business. So I do think that has to be in place, or should be in place eventually.
I think it's pretty important, because if you don't have that, you're going to see DACs be abused, right? It's kind of like, if people say, oh, you can make an organization that centers around anything and no one in that organization is liable for its activities, we're going to see some terrible DACs. You know, what I think we want to see is DACs who, you know, say, this is how we're accountable to you, and this is how we're accountable, and this is who is accountable. And then that, you know, then the DAC model can't be abused.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Mel talks about insurance, public liability insurance, or and bonds and things like that are ways to keep companies and DACs accountable, which I think we should get that up, you know, soon, even, you know, while we're creating these organizations. So let me see. So we might want to take questions from the audience. What do you guys think? Any other? And then maybe at the end of it, we'll talk about what we'll do kind of in the coming weeks. But what do you think? What do you guys want to do? Do you want to maybe just answer some questions? If you look at Ask a Question, there are questions there that we can answer. And for those that don't know about it, you know, there's an Ask a Question feature on this platform. So Jason says, try to connect tokenomics and fiduciary duty. So yeah, that might be another way to do it, where the tokenomic design can help minimize problems.
Yeah, I think like there's no reason why a DAC couldn't have a sort of automated with software.
I think, Justin, your video broke up a little bit here, so we'll wait till you kind of get back.
Jason's question is a scary can of worms there for me, just because like if you have fiduciary duty, you need someone to enforce it. If your members all over the world, you know, that's probably going to lead right into the EOS governance, you know, conversation, because, you know, with fiduciary duty is nothing if there's no enforcement. Yeah, you know, everyone could scream and cry and say, hey, you know, they ran away with, the DAC has ran away with our money, and they have fiduciary duty to us. But if there's no one to enforce it, then what can you do?
Yeah. So, and the fiduciary duty part could mean individual fiduciary duty for running the DAO, which we have to consider, because that can happen, and that's why you have fiduciary duty in companies, because you can embezzle money out of any organization, but you're not looking out for shareholders, right? This is like, anyway, so there's that part of it. There's also the duty of a company, you know, that's maybe not so much fiduciary duty, but just, you know, just the duty for as a business to satisfy customers and not, you know, have uphold any kind of you know, obligations to your customer and not do harm. But so there's that kind of duty. Maybe it's not fiduciary duty, but unless I think fiduciary, usually when you have this responsibility that is put on you. So if you're a company, you have fiduciary duty to the company. If you're a company, maybe it wouldn't be considered fiduciary. So I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, where the question lies. If it's on the company side where you're running the company, yeah, I mean, how do you? That's a very good question. Like, Haley, how would you, as a let's say fiduciary, if you're, and we don't really have fiduciaries if we're so decentralized that we're just contributing, let's say. But if there's do we have fiduciary responsibility? Because we're contributing, we don't like have this treasure. Well, we do actually with DAOs. Like we the way it's structured right now, it's not a multi-sig. So right now there is like fiduciary responsibility, because you have one key that holds the entire DAO treasury. And so there is this fiduciary obligation there. In the future, we'll have a massive multi-sig, I assume, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, that's where I was going in my head, is probably the best way to answer Jason's question, to link the two, is whoever holds that key that you're talking about, they are, their position to hold that key is completely determined by the very people who you'd have the fiduciary duty to. So if they in any way just went rogue, they're gone. Right, the token holders, the tokenomics allow the users, the stakeholders, to remove that person. Basically, you know, if you ensuring that the person who needs the fiduciary duty, you know, has all the incentives, or just they're at the beck and call of the token holders. You know, and I think that is how these structures are working, right? That the token holders elect, you know, in EOS DAC's case, the custodians, and they can remove the custodians if the custodians don't basically follow through on their duty. I don't know if that's a fiduciary duty, but that's kind of where the control comes in. Yeah.
And sorry, Justin, you kind of broke up. Hey, thanks, Haley. Yeah, that makes sense. One thing to follow up with that, Haley, is that if you have like this kind of more standard corporate model, like where there is like someone has majority ownership, and then, you know, it gets tricky though. Like then there could be some some issues there. So, but yeah, generally, if you have it's stakes spread around the DAC, which should be normally what you have, a broader, I guess, number of stakeholders that can decide, we can recover from, these, I guess, malpractices. So, so Justin, I don't know if you kind of broke up.
Oh, that's all right. I think Haley covered it off pretty well. I think for me, it's like it's an unknown area that we need to work out. So yeah, I don't really have too much more to add than what Haley was saying there.
So, maybe we got maybe about 10 minutes left. We'll try to do an hour. It could be over if it's 10 or 15 minutes. The governance study group is very dense, so those go on for 2 hours plus. So, but we'll try to keep these like maybe more efficient, but we have plenty to talk about even here too. But it's okay. We'll kind of just have this pattern of just trying to. I'm hoping like at least an hour, maybe an hour 15 or so if needed. But let's answer. Do you want to answer some of the question, guys? At the bottom, there's a bunch. So
I was looking at Mel's question, which is, don't we have to worry that large tech organizations such as Google, Amazon, and Facebook become whales in this new area, taking away the whole point of a DAC? I think it's a great question. The thing that pops into mind, maybe I'll try to find the link, but basically kind of or right around the same time as crypto, there was this project that crowdfunded their own laptop. So there's a bunch of people that got together and said, we want our own laptop. We don't want it from Dell or Microsoft. Like we want to build a laptop that the community wants. So here you had like these big incumbent companies who have all the purchasing power and the factories. But you actually had the community kind of rise up and say like, we're going to build something that we want for ourselves. And as soon as I'm done talking, I'll try to find the link. And I think that so my response to Mel's question is like, if the old system ever imposed itself too much on this technology, as long as you still have a community who kind of reject that premise and move over and start their own thing, it's the technology that's kind of liberating and enables anyone to do that. That's, for me, part of the exciting thing about DACs, and I think it's a double-edged sword, is anyone can start a DAC. Anyone can launch their own token with a few minutes, especially people who know what they're doing. And the cost is so low. The cost is so low to do it that all these systems can be created. And so the double-edged. So on the one hand, we're going to see all this innovation, all this experimentation, and we're going to, a lot of it's going to fail, but we're going to see what works. On the other hand, and on the other side, I'm worried that it's going to be hard to tell the difference between a DAC and a pyramid scheme. You can write a white paper that it's really indistinguishable between the two, and it all comes down to the integrity of the group launching it. And I think we're going to see a lot of that too. A lot of, not illicit DACs, right? If the DAC model takes off, you're going to get copycats who aren't going to follow through. So anyway, that was a tangent, but I guess my point is, as long as there's a community of people who want something, and now this technology, like the barrier of entry to banding together and creating it, self-organizing, it doesn't matter what the big guys do, as long as there's a committed group of people who want something else.
Yeah, I think that was a great point you raised there, Haley, about DACs resembling a pyramid scheme to begin with. Because I feel like they probably will, or originally, until we get to that point where they're working really well, it'll still be somewhat like companies where if you get in early, you're going to be rewarded more. But I think the great thing about what we have with blockchain and what we're able to do with tokenomics is that with blockchain, if something isn't working for people, they can just fork off and do another one. Like it's just so easy to say, oh, this isn't working, let's go to a new model, or let's change things up. So eventually you'll get to a stage where things are working optimally well. In response to the kind of original question about kind of, companies like Amazon, et cetera, just being too large to kind of compete against ever, I feel like we'll eventually kind of get to that stage where we're actually working more efficiently and able to do things better. And Haley also, talked about this, but there's certain efficiencies with running a DAC. And, as I was saying earlier, if you want to grow the amount of people working on a project, there's no barriers to entry. You could have, tens of thousands of people working on that project altogether within months or a year. So I don't feel like Amazon and Google can actually compete against that. They can't compete with that openness of allowing people to actually contribute. And I don't think they can compete on the level of incentivization either, where people are being rewarded significant amounts of stake, no matter what period they start joining in on the project.
All right, that's great. Hopefully that answers your question. Well, one thing I'll say is if all these big companies are getting into crypto, that's probably a good sign, right? But let's see if there's any other questions here. Costa Rica crypto. Okay, what do you think the DAC airdrop model is working? What are some of the inefficiencies? What can be improved? Maybe someone wants to address that. Because it is a popular, it's a popular model right now, the airdrops. So,
I must say, when I originally heard about the airdrop that EOS DAC did, I felt like this is vote buying, and I didn't like it. And I don't know if I still think it's the right model, but I've sort of drawn away from that feeling at least. For me, I feel like the best way to kind of receive part of a DAC is actually to join in and contribute work. And I feel like that should just be completely open and people should just be able to contribute easily and be able to be rewarded. But I don't necessarily see the point of airdropping kind of free stake in an organization. But yeah, I'm sort of 50-50 on that. Maybe it should be there just so people know about it and have a taste of it and can have a small vote in the system. But ultimately, I feel like most of it should be earned and not just given away.
I think airdropping, it's a new thing. I'm not a big fan of the carpet bomb airdrop. It's like a very crude, it's a really cool concept, but the air bomb where you just kind of everyone with an account gets a 1-to-1 token for however many EOS they have. It works. It can create hype. You put tokens in the hands of the people, people who have the most EOS now have the most of your token, and that can be a good thing. But you can be so much more creative with an airdrop. And you can blend it with an ICO. You can blend it with an air grab. You can say, hey, anyone voting for 30 block producers gets this. Hey, anyone who, you can basically incentivize behavior on chain with a reward, and that kind of stuff's really cool. And I just think the sky's the limit for what we can do with it. We're calling it airdrop now. Who knows what we'll call it, or if it'll even be distinguished as an airdrop 2 years from now? Because there's already people who are giving you more tokens if you vote. They're giving you, you only get an airdrop if it's staked. If you stuff like that, it really kind of leverages the power of the blockchain to create really cool incentive systems. And that's part of what excites me about the blockchain is, it's incentives. You can really create awesome incentives very cheaply with code and roll them out. So that's I think the airdrop model is an evolution from the ICO model, and it's just going to keep evolving.
I'll echo the same sentiments with airdrops. I think there's probably better ways to get people who contribute more, get more incentivized, rather than people just, maybe for marketing purposes. Others, aside from that, just to give people without any contribution, it doesn't align the incentives well enough. So I would shy away from doing too many airdrops. Is my thought, because if people don't sacrifice anything, it's actually also they don't value it as much either, and so that's another problem. So anyway, so for a variety of reasons, I think you have to be careful. I think if you're thinking of airdrops, it's fun, it's for marketing, and I think it can help there. And there's some kind of reciprocation, like people get something they feel like they want to contribute. There's some of that, but I think for the most part, there's more risk that people just won't, pay attention after they get it, and they'll just sell it. So,
yeah. Although, so another, like, we're at EOS Cafe, we're talking about an airdrop and a tokenomic system. And one of the things that we kind of discovered with the blanket airdrop is, you do need liquidity, right? It's like, you don't want everyone to sell your token. You don't want to dump it on, like, the majority of your tokens on people who don't want it. But, like, it's really nice to have your token in an exchange. And like, so that people can easily, it has a price and people get in and out of it. And for that, you need buyers and sellers. So there is something to be said for creating an instant market for something. Everyone has it, and some people don't want it, and some people do. Again, I'm not a big pro of just the blanket airdrop, the carpet bomb, but you do want people to sell your token, because you want people, then it has liquidity, exchanges will pick it up. It's I think that's part of the reason that you're seeing the airdrop model.
Hey, Vile, have a good one. So yeah, thanks for your insights. We'll kind of keep up to date with your EOS Cafe project, Haley, to see how you guys design that and what your thought process is. So,
well, one of the coolest things that we're talking about is actually geo-specific airdrops. And I think, and that's where I get really excited about I get excited about blockchain, but when we combine it with other technologies, Internet of Things, biometrics, something like a GPS and a phone, that's, I think, where this stuff just takes off, right? It's like, hey, you want this token? Go to this physical location. It's waiting for you. Like, that kind of stuff's really cool. And is that an airdrop? Maybe not. Maybe, like, but it kind of works like one. It's just, you get that much more engagement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like the combination of biometrics and unique identity. I feel like having a user join a ecosystem is worth something, and I think people should be rewarded for that alone. But I think, where it gets tough is like rewarding everyone proportionally with how much they already own in EOS. And I think maybe you do need to do an element of that for creating that liquidity in the system. But for the majority, I feel like rewarding people for joining and then starting to contribute is where I would want the majority of the tokens to go, other than people who are contributing to making the system work in the first place. So yeah, it's all about getting that balance right, I feel.
And that's where your comments about hyperinflation also make a lot of sense. You can airdrop, but if you have like 100% inflation or even more, the people who don't actually come and engage your platform, in the end, they didn't get much. And the people who are engaging your platform, it's just like Steam, right? You have a mechanism to keep them whole. So they don't get inflated. The people using the platform don't get inflated away. The people who never kind of responded to the airdrop don't, like, yeah. So in EOS, there's a RAM element to that is costly, but inflation schemes can kind of help balance that. It's better than just removing it all from all the inactive accounts, because maybe someone loves your project and they're just holding. But by adding that inflation scheme, it's like, okay, well, if you really love the project, come engage with the platform, and then you don't get inflated away.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the way I see inflation is it's a bit like in a startup, and we've seen like success in the centralized world in that a startup will spend a ton of money at the beginning to actually spur things on. And I feel like inflation is doing the same thing. You you inflate the rewards, especially early on, to get things going, then lots of people can start contributing. It's like having that startup runway. So yeah, but you do need to get it right. I feel like people who earn a certain amount at the start of the project, I think you would never want to have inflation so high that their rewards actually devalue in terms of a stable currency. Like if I was to propose the Hyperloop, say I'm Elon Musk, you know, he just put out a paper or whatever, he should get like a reward for that in slicing pie. And then, you know, obviously maybe he doesn't want to continue that. But, you know, you shouldn't inflate the system so much that the actual value in terms of a stable currency of that actually goes down. It should always be going up. The inflation itself should encourage lots of people to get on board and start contributing and actually making that idea happen. But then early contributors should still, in terms of a stable currency, still be going up like a ton if it's a successful idea that is coming to fruition. But you might start with 100% and you might go all the way down to 0.001%, but that 100% that you owned at the beginning might have been worth, you know, $100,000 as an idea. By the time you only own 0.001% of the organization because you've stopped contributing and lots of other people have made it happen, I would expect that 100,000 to have gone up like 10,000%, you know, if it's a really great idea that actually comes to fruition. So at the end of the day, like being greedy about percentages, I feel there's no point in it, because at the end of the day, it's all about the value that the total organization is actually worth.
That's a great example, Justin. You know, we want to grow the pie. So even if you have a smaller percentage, it's actually worth more. And it's hard for people to think about, they all, you know, just how that works. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, Steve Jobs had 100% of the company in the beginning, I think, right? Well, him and Wozniak, right? And by the time he left Apple, he had less than 1%, but he was still like far wealthier than he started out in a garage in Silicon Valley. So it goes to show you, yeah, it's growing the pie is more important than how much, what size you have or what piece of it you have. So real quick, Mel, you should be able to type on the side. I don't know what was the issue there, but we're about 7 minutes, after the hour. Maybe what we can do, I don't know, there's a lot of questions. Maybe we should save for next week. Also, yeah, we can do interviews as well. Luke was, he's in Puerto Rico, so he was the other person, the third person in EOS Ignite that did a presentation on tokenomics. So we'll try to interview him and learn the latest on EOS DAC. Maybe next week, I'm not sure. But let's maybe at this point just try to gather some questions for us to think about for the next week, or any questions. Maybe we could write it down, or and just have it as topics for discussion in the coming series of ours. So what do you guys think? You guys want to do that?
Any questions coming through? We should definitely, look to address them next week.
So any other like topics that you guys can think of? We'll have the questions at the bottom. We can record to answer next week or the following. Downfall potential self-governing communities, pitfalls. So yeah, if you guys can. Okay, Dan Larimer's idea on, I think, the URI. We'll get to that. We actually have a session later today like 5 hours from now, we'll discuss not only worker proposals, but we'll get into URI, which is Universal Resource Inheritance. And then Haley's going to be there too. He can talk on that subject as well. So Jaron has a ton of questions, which is great. I think we're all trying to learn and just accelerate our understanding so we can implement DACs. So yeah, feel free, Jaron. It seems like you might be interested in creating a DAC as well. So, so any other topics you guys can think of, Haley or Justin, for the coming weeks? Just maybe broad topics or specific.
When I think about DACs, and this goes to Costa Rica Crypto's kind of question about the pitfalls. I love the idea of a self-directing organization, like something that almost defines itself, like dynamically. But I also think there's a huge pitfall in trying to build something like that, because everyone doesn't really know what they are when they get started. So it's really cool because you create this organization that can kind of evolve as it goes, and the users, the community has a say in what it can become. But how do you but also, I also feel that like a way to have a success as a DAC is to be very narrow in your scope. So everyone knows exactly what the plan is, exactly how it's going to be executed, exactly how they can add value, what the token stands for, all of this. So it's kind of like, it's this balance between a DAC could be anything and could evolve into anything based on who joined it and how they're adding value. But that's harder to get off the ground than a very narrow scope is very easy to understand. This is what this token does. If I join, this is the cause. They don't do anything else. At least you know that all your users get it, and you can all start going in the same direction quickly because it was kind of scoped out from the beginning what it would be. So I find that balance quite interesting. How, I think if you just started a DAC and said, we can do anything we want to, that I think is the Tower of Babel. Nothing's ever going to happen. If you joined create a DAC and you said, we're going to save this sliver of rainforest in this specific country, that's a very easy DAC to maybe operate, but are you going to attract that many people to that cause? That's kind of a balance that I don't know. I think you're going to see a lot of DACs in the middle of those two things.
Yeah, that's an awesome topic. One topic I'd love to talk more about is like with BPs, like especially like from your opinion, Haley, and also from what Luke would say is like, yeah, what are the pitfalls of running a BP as a DAC? Like, what's it like running it as a DAC versus running your BP as a normal organization? That'd be interesting to kind of talk about.
Yeah, well, we actually specifically divided the two entities because of the legal ramifications. Then that was just the glaring pitfall from the beginning was okay, this entity needs a bank account. How do you get a bank account if you're not a legal entity? Was just kind of stared us right in the face in terms of BP versus DAC. So that was our approach. I know the EOS DAC went a different route.
Cool. I would love to talk about it now, but Jun, how much time do we have left, or should we do this stuff next week?
We should have these cliffhangers so that people come back and answer the question. I don't know. And the other thing is like we probably like try to kind of squeeze it in an hour just to be efficient, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I mean that's a good topic. Maybe we'll keep that like BPs and DACs and maybe we'll have Luke participate in that. Maybe give us an update on how things are going. And then Haley can add to that with what they're doing with EOS Cafe. So just have it as a cliffhanger next week. You guys got to come back. But and it's just I think more efficient and just to kind of keep it that way.
Are you guys going to be in London next week?
I wish.
No. Okay. I was thinking we could live stream from the same location, but I guess not.
Oh yeah, is it Tuesday next week? or
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm there from the 20th to the 28th.
20th, 28th. Oh, okay, I didn't realize it was. But you know, this is virtual, so even if you're
we can.
Yeah, 25th is yeah what we're scheduled for. So, but yeah, I mean, we should just kind of keep. Hopefully, you know, you guys are able to come back, and we'll add guests and maybe even bring in people from the audience every once in a while. But yeah, I think this is great. This is fantastic. I think
discussion.
Yeah, this is a great discussion, and we're just we're kind of at the at the very forefront, I think, of where I see the blockchains going. So I think it's exciting. So yeah, it'd be great to answer those questions about BPs and DACs, how they fit next week. Hopefully, Haley, you can make next week, the 25th.
Yeah. I'll just I don't know where I'll be in London, but I'm sure I can make it. So just send me a calendar invite, and I'll work around that.
Okay, great. And then Justin, he's in Mexico, which is great.
That'll be great.
I feel like going down there. The weather must be like a lot nice as it gets closer to the winter. Like I feel like that's the place to be, right? So
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It's a bit like it's been a bit wet and rainy so far, but yeah.
Oh, okay, weird. Cool. So thanks, Jason. Thanks, Costa Rica, Jern, all you guys out there. So yeah, we'll keep this going. This is great. And and as we accumulate all these questions, I'll start writing down all the various list of topics, and hopefully, you know, we'll go through those every week. So so really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Haley.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for organizing.
Thanks so much, Justin. And we'll keep this going. This is great. And you know, anybody who's interested in tokenomics, if you know people that are interested in DACs, there's just feel free to invite them. Another word for tokenomics I've heard recently is mechanism design. And there's actually some consulting companies that are recruiting Nobel laureates to participate on their team and design or help consult companies to design their platform. So it's I know a local mechanism design company as well. That's probably different from the other one, and there's like a lot of academia participating in that. So it does seem to be a trend, I think, as well. So that's the tokenomics side. DAX is also, you know, just closely related. So all right, guys.
I think game theory affects both in a big way. So the academics, I can see their involvement.
Great.
Yeah, we need more economists and we need more video game designers, I feel. So yeah, those are two great topics there.
Yeah, the kind of interesting to see that. Yeah, those are kind of two very different areas, and that we can learn from both. So. All right, awesome, guys. Really hope, you guys have a great rest of your day. I know, Haley, I'll see you we have a worker proposal webcast, worker proposal and URI webcast in about 5 hours, or actually at 9 p.m. Eastern. So maybe we'll see you guys there too. But and Haley will be there discussing URI and other topics. So anyways, I'll kind of end the broadcast. If there's no last words, you guys want to say anything?
No, looking forward to next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Too. Cheers, guys.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, Haley. Ciao.
See you, Justin.